how do you turn a serial killer into the good guy? We're about to find out. Hi, I am writer and artist Dan Finley, and this is The Story Grind, a show where we look at storytelling so we can become better storytellers. On today's episode, we are looking at issue number 1 of Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees from IDW. So, Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees is a horror comic. It is 22 pages long and runs for 6 issues. Here are the credits. Now, there's a small bit of storytelling in the credits, which is kind of fun. Not only do we get the names of the creative team, but it's designed like a newspaper. The headline of this paper tells us that the bicentennial celebration is about to happen. With each successive issue, the newspaper actually becomes altered in a really fun way that reflects the story and updates us on what has happened in the past issues. So let's look at the log line first. Don't murder the locals. This is small-town serial killer, upstanding citizen, and adorable brown bear Samantha Strong's cardinal rule. A sea of potential victims is in the city just beyond the forest. But when you've worked as hard as Sam to build a cozy life, and a thriving business in a community surrounded by friendly fellow animal folk, warm decor, and the aroma of cedar trees and freshly baked apple pie, the last thing you want to do is to disturb the peace. So imagine Sam's indignation when one of Woodbrook's own meets a grisly and mysterious demise. You wouldn't blame her for doing anything it takes to hunt down her rival before the town self-destructs and Sheriff Patterson starts barking up the wrong tree. Alright, let's get into it. Here, scene 1, 2 pages long. We open with Samantha, an anthropomorphic bear, narrating the scene as she walks through the small suburban town of Woodbrook. This is one of those small towns where everyone knows each other's name and says hi. She tells us about how this is the perfect small town. She passes by a goat named Martin, who is trying to get a newspaper, but we quickly discover that Martin suffers from possibly dementia, because he already has a newspaper and has asked for a new one 3 times. This establishes an interesting point of empathy for Martin. So what did we learn in just this short 2-page scene? So the scene establishes the quaint small town and establishes a tone. We've got anthropomorphic animals walking around, talking to each other and holding down jobs. This is the ordinary world and is presented in this sort of fairy tale slice of Americana. The black ink lines, cartooning, and soft watercolor tones make this feel like something straight out of a children's book, and I'm certain that's intentional. All the panels are borderless, and the page feels airy and bright, which really suits the tone. Here we go. Scene 2 is 3 pages long. So I'll start off by saying that this scene is sort of a mess, yet does something really, really smart. Let's check it out. Samantha owns and operates the local hardware store. We see her helping out a turtle named Birdie, who is building a float for the bicentennial parade. Charlie, who I think is an otter, is Samantha's employee and announces that a delivery has arrived. Samantha wants it all in the back and appears to have a very specific idea that things need to be neat and tidy, giving us some insight into her personality. Birdie comes back into the scene, telling Sam he's going to get more dowels for his float. Now another customer named Nigel asks Charlie about light bulbs. They're interrupted by Martin the goat, who asks them if they've seen his glasses, and Charlie tells them they're on his face. Nigel checks out with Sam at the register. He's in town to take care of his mom, who happens to be Sam's closest friend. All 3 are having dinner tomorrow night. Martin, the senile goat, interrupts their conversation and asks them if they've seen his glasses. Now Charlie takes the deliveries to the back and is startled when the lights turn on. His wife and kids have shown up. His wife Pauline has locked herself out of the house, and the kids need to go to school, so she's there to get Charlie's keys. The scene ends with Samantha telling Charlie that his clipboard is upside down, sort of a strange detail to point out. And then she also mentions that she's headed into the city. So, see what I mean? It's kind of a mess of a scene, but yet really smart in some ways. So let's start with what we learned in the scene. We learned that Sam owns the local hardware store and that she's very neat and tidy. We met the turtle Birdie, whose name isn't dropped really until the end of the book. We've got Charlie, who we've met, the otter, and his wife Pauline and their kids. We also saw a brief conversation with Nigel the mouse, who's in town to take care of his mother. And also Nigel's mother is the best friend of Sam. And they will all 3 be having dinner tomorrow night. Martin the goat also makes another appearance, kind of exhibiting his dementia. And that's a lot of information for one short scene. You'll notice that there is no polarity change in this scene. Samantha is the exact same at the beginning of the scene as she is at the end of the scene, and that's kind of strange. I suspect that the creative team knew that something was off in this scene and didn't know how to fix it, and instead threw a whole bunch of characters and moments in there to distract us. So in a broad way, I don't feel like the scene actually works. And I always say, like, if there's no polarity change in the scene, then it should be thrown out. But you can't do that here. Why not? And that's why I think the scene is a mess, but also really smart. This is a mystery whodunit. And if you know anything about these stories, it's that the person who did it has to be introduced pretty early on in the story. So cramming so many characters and moments into one scene is a really nice way to throw out some red herrings for the reader. Personally, I always feel red herrings are important and incredibly difficult because the audience is pretty smart. Anytime I write a mystery, I feel like I've hidden the culprit pretty well. And then I'm disappointed when, like, my beta readers say that they knew it was them from the beginning. A great way to hide the suspect is what this scene does, and it's to give the reader a fire hose of information so they actually don't know who to look at. With that said, I think there's a way to pull this off in a more elegant way. One way is to have fix the scene is to focus on Samantha's need to be tidy, and let that be the polarity change for this scene. Then we get a chance to experience her behavior instead of her stating it outright. Maybe Sam is swamped with customers. It's complete chaos. And then the delivery arrives. She's so busy that she asks Charlie to stock the stuff for her up front, but his bad eyesight makes him stock some things maybe in a way that Samantha doesn't like maybe the labels aren't lined up exactly. And this triggers her compulsion, and it actually shows us how neat and tidy she actually really prefers to be. This also allows us to keep all the characters in the same room instead of bouncing around. This version takes Sam from overwhelmed to calm, or negative to positive. All right, scene 3, 4 pages long. Samantha drives from the small town into the city, and we can see a visible change on her face as she leaves Woodbrook. Now we get a glimpse of the dirt under the perfect facade of Samantha. Her narration picks up again as she tells us that she only has a couple of rules. First, no playing in Woodbrook, only in cities. We don't exactly know what that means yet. Visually, we get a very different look at life in the city as compared to what we'd just seen in Woodbrook. Lots of traffic, punks drinking on the street, lots of foot traffic, card sharks hustling pedestrians, etc. Samantha continues narrating that if someone goes missing in Woodbrook, everyone would be talking about it. But people go missing in the city all the time. Her other rule? Always keep it random. So we see a duck walk up the street, and he notices that Samantha is having car trouble. He asks if she needs help. She accepts his help and directs him to some tools in the trunk of the car. When he has his back turned, she knocks him out with some chloroform on a rag. So what did we learn in this scene? In this scene, we discovered that a friendly cartoon bear is up to no good. And this is an interesting twist on the character that we've seen so far. Scene 4, 6 pages long. Now we finally get to see what Samantha is up to. She tells us through narration that her victims never wake up again. She drives a nail into the back of the duck's head, killing him. She says she doesn't want a mess. She just wants to be in control as she suspends her victim by the feet and drains them of their blood. Samantha dices up the body and puts the pieces in paint cans, which she buries in the woods. She says that she's buried 43 people out here over the course of 20 years. So what did we learn in this scene? We discovered that this children's book cartoon bear is actually a serial killer. She's meticulous and kind of terrifying. Everything that has been established about her has been turned on its head, which I find really, really interesting. I want to add that seeing the duck chopped up like that was actually pretty disturbing for me. But then I thought people eat duck all the time, so I really shouldn't be that shocked. But it really kind of is a testament to the idea that I was sucked into this world of cartoon animals, and all of a sudden you're kind of seeing one of them being dissected and chopped up into pieces, and it's pretty shocking, I think, and very effective. Again, at the beginning of this, I said that I think it's intentional that this is drawn like a children's book story, and now you see why, because the contrast of the violence in this story is so stark against the children's book illustration. Okay, scene 5, 3 pages long. Samantha has dinner with her best friend of 40 years, Lola, and her son Nigel, the mouse. Lola has a disease that is withering her body away. Through their conversation, we learn that Samantha has been all over the world traveling, but took over the hardware store from her parents. Lola wants Nigel to go back to school and finish his master's, but he doesn't appear to be interested. They all appear to be stuck in this town, but Samantha says that Woodbrook isn't so bad once you find your place in it. Okay, scene 6, 4 pages long. This is the day of the parade, and the town is celebrating 200 years. So Bertie the Turtle is on his float, which is a tall ship with large white sails. The entire town is watching and cheering. A ring holding up the sail suddenly breaks, and we see the faces of the crowd as they see something. Everyone reacts in shock except for Samantha. The final page of this book reveals our inciting incident. The sail has fallen to reveal Martin, the senile goat from earlier, and he has been crucified and disemboweled on the mast of this ship. Samantha tells us through narration that there's another serial killer in town who's murdering Woodbrook citizens and breaking her rules. And these murders are going to bring investigators who just might discover what she's been up to. Great hook for the final scene. So what did we learn in this final scene? Well, we learned that Samantha, her perfect life in this small town has just been upset by the arrival of another serial killer. And I think that sets up the story pretty well, as you know that she will try to most likely find who this person is and stop them so that she doesn't get busted herself, right? So let's take a look at this scene from a 10,000 foot view. The Story Grind is brought to you by the stories that I make. Get one of my digital mini comics for free when you join the newsletter and get monthly updates on my writing journey. If you want to see more of my work, check out my novels on Amazon and my comics on Gumroad. Links are below. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Your support means a lot, especially to a small channel like this. We have 6 scenes in total. The longest scene appears to be scene 4, which I believe is the scene where she murders the duck. The inciting incident falls on the very last page of scene 6. I think that's a good indicator that why this is 6 issues long, because when your inciting incident comes that late at the end of the first issue, you're going to need time to really tell this story. And I believe I heard at one point this was originally 5 issues, but they ended up expanding it into 6. I could be wrong about that though. So what do we know about the world in this first issue? Well, we've got cartoon character animals that are, one of in particular is making some pretty gruesome murders against other creatures and burying them in the woods. So this is definitely a horror story and kind of an interesting blend of horror and whodunit. So another obvious comparison to this story might be Dexter, which is a TV show that used to air, and it's focused on a serial killer who actually kills other serial killers or murderers. Now, I've never really watched that show, so I can't really speak to it very much, but it really kind of goes to show that you can make a serial killer the hero of your story, but there's a trick to it, and I think we'll get to that a little bit later. So what's at stake? I think the stakes are pretty high here in that Samantha has been committing crimes for the past, 20 years and has buried, over 40 bodies, I think she said. And she's about to be caught. And the weird thing is that we do kind of empathize with her because she's very clean, very tidy. She has rules. Her acts are incredibly gruesome, but at the same time, when you see another serial killer come into her town and break those rules and threaten her perfect life and her perfect setup, you really kind of look at her and say, and you're kind of rooting for her to kind of find this person. Personally, I find it odd that I kind of put her serial killing to the side a little bit and just kind of don't really think about that. And I'm still kind of rooting for her. Really strange. But I think sort of the magic of this story is that, or even the magic of any of sort of bad guy as protagonist, as hero of the story, making them someone you can root for it's a little tricky. So what are the points of empathy for Samantha? Well, we already talked a little bit about it. She is about to be caught. caught in the act of committing her own crimes, and someone is breaking the rules that she's established for herself. So someone is about to upset the balance of her perfect world. And I think we can empathize with that. What are some of the great things that stand out in this issue that I'll use in my writing? One of the great things I want to say is the idea of the contrast. The cartoon animals versus the grisly murders, incredibly striking. And I think the idea of juxtaposition of contrast, that is a technique that definitely I want to carry into my own writing. I'll say that I really liked how Martin was set up as a senile goat. He really only has a few lines at the beginning of the story, but to kind of see him at the end of the story sort of crucified and disemboweled like that, you remember who he is. Even though he's just said some weird random things at the very early parts of the story. So on top of this, I'll even talk about a little bit outside of this issue where I think Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees is a story you really should read because at some point, well, I would say like at the beginning of issue 2, it really becomes sort of like a detective mystery whodunit where Samantha is starting to try to track down who the serial killer is. And I think what makes this story really smart is at the midpoint, it actually flips the genre around. And it's a bit of a surprise. And I think sort of the best stories kind of give you that surprise at the midpoint. So I don't want to spoil it here. I'll let you read it for yourself and discover it for yourself. But really, a really great read all the way through. And some things I actually didn't touch on in this issue, but happens a little bit later on, is that this story isn't really afraid to get a little abstract at times. Like we end up in sort of like some dream sequences of Samantha or some kind of visions. And the fact that it kind of like steps away from the plot a little bit and just kind of gives us almost more of an expressionistic type of view into her life or her mindset, I think that's actually really well done as well. It's one of those things that I think a lot of people don't usually do. It can be a little scary, especially because it's so abstract and out there, but another great reason to check this book out. So what are the things that didn't work for me in this story? I'll say scene 2 obviously didn't work for me. I think that could have been maybe massaged a little bit better so that we could have some flow in there and we weren't bouncing around to so many different characters in so many different moments. I'll say there's actually one other scene in the book towards the very end in the last issue that really didn't, I won't say it didn't work for me. I'd say it was a little abrupt, but just sort of a minor thing. Maybe it's more of a personal thing, but I won't spoil that for you either. It's definitely worth checking out. So that's all I've got here for Beneath the Trees Where Nobody Sees. What do you think about the serial killer as protagonist? Did you empathize with Sam's dilemma of having another serial killer kind of on her territory and break her rules? What are other techniques that you would use to make a sort of a violent and despicable character more sympathetic to the reader? I would love to hear your comments down below. So again, I am writer and artist Dan Finley, and this is The Story Grind. Please like, follow, subscribe, and share with your storytelling friends. Let's build a community together where we can get better together as storytellers. I will see you next week. Thanks again. Take care.